Well, it's been a while since I made my last versus video, so I thought I should return to my roots and cover first person shooter characters again. And why not spice it up with some Wild West flair? Today we're having Silas Greaves, the legendary gunslinger from Call of Juarez, facing off against James Anderson, a retired U.S. Marshal from Outlaws. I'm Baron Karza, and I'm here to answer the question you never fucking asked. Who would win in a fight? So, a bit of a disclaimer due to the expansion packs, there are numerous events that transpire in James's life before the events of the campaign, and what I'm going to do is try my best to sort of make a timeline out of all this. Alright, so right from the beginning, James had a bit of a rough life. At 11 years old, he witnessed the death of his father. Eventually, when James grew up, he enlisted to fight in the Civil War, where he was responsible for taking down a Confederate general. After the end of the war, James decided to follow in his father's footsteps and become a lawman, rising through the ranks and becoming a U.S. Marshal. During his time as Marshal, James was loved by the townsfolk. That was until he killed a man before he could receive a proper trial. So, James retired and settled down on a farm with his wife, Annie, and his daughter, Sarah. However, James's life would take a drastic turn for the worst. Enter gentleman Bob Graham, a wealthy man who had plans to build a railway across the country. In order to further his goal, he would also hire a bunch of cutthroat outlaws. There was a small issue for Bob's plan. He needed land in which James's farm was settled on to build the railway, and James had no interest in selling it. So one day, while James was out shopping, Bob sent Dr. Death to enlighten Annie. Unfortunately for Bob, the doc had a very different definition of enlightenment. So when James came back, he found his house burned down and Annie was on the brink of death, using her last words to tell James that Sarah had been kidnapped. What transpires next is basically a Wild West version of Taken. After James basically steamrolls through his goons, Bob sends Dr. Death to kill him. Because the Doc got Bob into this situation, he's got to get him out of it. This goes exactly as well as you'd expect for the Doc.
I'll be back.
Hey, you can't leave me down here. Pull me up right now. You son of a bitch. What's your wife's name? What is it? You know, I kind of liked her. She smelled sweet, that woman. Like a rose. Now, what was it the bard said? What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Let me see. Anna! Yes, that's her name. And does Anna smell sweet right now? Oh, yeah. Don't leave me down here! To die and to go where we know not? To lie in cold obstruction and to rot? Is that what he said? Or was it?
Eventually, James finally makes it to Bob and has his final showdown with the man himself. And it's revealed that Bob was the one who killed James's dad all those years ago. Just when Bob got the upper hand on James, Sarah was able to grab a hold of a gun and killed the gentleman. With his daughter saved and both his wife and father avenged, James rides into the sunset with his daughter, thus marking the end of his story. For weapons, James has a Colt 45. It's his starting pistol, a revolver that he can quickly reload, and he can fan the hammer for rapid fire. Next, he has a Henry 44 rifle. It's great for picking away foes at a distance, and it's outfitted with a scope. Then he has a Remington single 10 gauge shotgun. It can only hold one shell, but it's pretty good for close quarters combat. He also has a double 10 gauge shotgun, it's basically the upgrade. Then he has the American Arms shotgun. It's a sawed off shotgun that's kind of shit at long ranges, but at close range, it'll tear through multiple opponents. James has a stick of dynamite that he can throw at opponents. He also has a Bowie knife, good for close quarters combat, or he could throw it for stealth takedowns. Finally, his strongest weapon is the Ash Ink semi-portable Gatling gun. It can dish out devastating damage unmatched by anything in his arsenal, but it needs to be mounted on its base and held in place while firing, which means that James is going to be immobile when he's using it. And since James is a boomer shooter protagonist, he can carry all of his weapons at once. Besides weapons, James has a fair amount of items he can use. He has a medical bag, which he can use to recover health, a badge, which increases the damage he deals while also reducing the damage he takes. Finally, there's the boilerplate, which is basically the armor. He presumably wears this under his shirt. What it does is that it reduces all damage James takes from the front, since it only covers, the front part of his body. Feats, there isn't much to talk about. Silas can knock out or kill a human in 2 punches, and the guy is surprisingly strong. He can carry all of his weapons at once without being slowed down, which this would also include his Gatling gun that weighs about 77 kg. Durability-wise, he can take multiple bullets, and he can further increase his survivability with the boilerplate. In terms of speed, he's been shown to be able to dodge bullets, which has been calculated to put his perception at 9 meters per second. So overall, James is mildly superhuman, at least in terms of speed. Like all great legends of the Wild West, Silas had humble beginnings. He and his 2 brothers made a living running cattle throughout the Juarez desert. One day, the brothers decided to take a break, and to kill some time, Silas got into a poker game with a bunch of cowboys, winning a lot of cash and an old Spanish coin from the Conquistador era. Things were looking good for Silas. Unfortunately for him, and especially his brothers, those cowboys were sore losers. The next day, they followed Silas and his brothers to the border in Texas. Those cowboys were Johnny Ringo, Jim Reed, and Roscoe Bob Bryant. All of them were real people, and Bob has so little information on him that even my laziest essays are longer than his fucking Wikipedia article. Anyway, the trio hung Silas and his brothers to a tree, and before they left, Bob put the Spanish coin in Silas's mouth and left him with these parting words. "I won't let it be said I left you with nothing, boy." And as the cowboys left, the combined weight of the 3 brothers was enough to break the branch. Silas survived. The same couldn't be said about his brothers. That day, he swore vengeance on those cowboys. During his quest for vengeance, Silas essentially became the Forrest Gump of the Wild West, interacting with practically every major outlaw in that period. He rode with Billy the Kid, faced off against Henry Plummer, John Wesley Hardin, Jesse James, and the Daltons, and the Sundance Kid. In short, he pretty much met every notable outlaw from that era. During the encounters with many games, Silas was able to kill Ringo and Jim. Bob still eluded him, however. Silas continued tracking him down for 40 years, taking on many outlaws around that period. And over time, Silas felt that his quest for vengeance had consumed him almost completely, turning him into a man whose only purpose in life was to kill Bob. So when he finally tracked him down to a bar in Abilene, Silas was left with a choice: to take the path of vengeance and finally kill Bob after 40 years, or choose the path of redemption and spare the man's life.
I was a different man back then, crazy. Drinking, I changed my ways, I swear to you. If I could turn back the clock, But you can't, Bob.
In terms of weapons, Silas Greaves has your typical Wild West fare. First off, we have the one-handed weapons, all of which Silas can dual wield. There's the 6-shooter, which is a Remington 1890. It's your typical starting pistol, not too strong, not too weak, has decent range. Next is the Colt 1951, the game calls it a Ranger. much stronger than a six-shooter, better range, but slowest firing pistol. Then there's the quick shooter, which is a Smith & Wesson Schofield. It's the opposite of Ranger. Fires very quickly, but overall is the weakest pistol and has the worst range. The final one-handed weapon is the sawed-off shotgun, which can fire each barrel independently. It's what you'd expect. It has okay-ish range, but it does a lot of damage to compensate. Next up, we got the two-handed weapons. The Winchester Model 1892 rifle, good for taking out enemies from afar, of course. Then there's the 10-gauge Whitney shotgun, though the model resembles a Remington. It can fire one barrel at a time and can just do a lot of fucking damage, of course. Silas can also throw bundles of dynamite, which he can either shoot them out of the air or somehow cause them to split into three more bundles of dynamite. Not like smaller bundles, I mean like they just split into three identical bundles. Somehow. It's also worth noting that all the guns mentioned here have upgraded versions that increase their damage, firing rate, or in the case of shotguns, spread. Since Silas is a modern FPS protagonist, he can't carry all of his weapons. You know the rules. Pistol, long weapon, and then explosives. That's all Silas is carrying, though he seems to be lucky to always find weapons lying around. Silas's most notable ability is called concentration. When Silas enters concentration, his perception of time slows down, allowing him to better focus his shots. Now, this is an insanely useful ability, but it does have a few caveats. First, there is a limit to how much he can use concentration. He can't stay in this state for long. Second, he can only regain concentration by killing enemies, and considering that this is a one-on-one fight, Silas isn't going to get a chance to refill his concentration meter. Another ability Silas has is Sense of Death. Sense of Death allows Greaves to enter a state similar to concentration, in which he slows down his perception of time. Sense of Death only activates when Silas is about to take a lethal shot, so it basically allows him to avoid an attack that would usually kill him. However, after Sense of Death kicks in, there will be a short cooldown before he can use it again. Finally, Silas has a mild healing factor. Like every modern FPS protagonist, Silas can recover health gradually, provided he avoids taking damage for enough time. Over the course of the game, Silas can obtain various upgrades. Now, these upgrades can provide a variety of effects, such as increased ammo capacity, faster reloading, and increased damage. I did already bring up some in the weapons segments, some upgrades only take effect when an enemy is killed, and since this is a one-on-one fight, I'll be ignoring those upgrades. So I'm only going to bring up the ones that will have an impact on the fight. First off is Cold Rage, which increases the amount of damage Silas does while in concentration. Next is Eagle's Eye, which allows Silas to slightly slow down his perception of time. It's a sort of diet version of concentration. It only slows down a fraction as much as concentration. Steady Aim allows Silas to zoom even more while aiming steadily while he focuses on a single target for a while. None Can Hide alerts Silas of the location of enemies beyond his field of view. Executioner essentially allows Silas's next shot during concentration to be an automatic headshot, at the cost of making concentration run out faster. Next is Crusader's Armor. It makes it so that on average, every fourth bullet from an enemy will bounce off Silas, though this only applies to pistols. Righteous Fire. It functions as a sort of counterattack. After Sense of Death activates, Silas gets a free headshot on his assailant, and this works with every weapon. Hell, he can even somehow get headshots from a distance with a sawed-off shotgun. Returning Favors allows Silas to throw back enemy dynamite, and Sixth Sense allows Silas to better focus his aim during concentration. Strength-wise, Silas is able to kill people with a single pistol whip. Now that sounds impressive on paper until you remember that Silas's guns probably weigh about as much as a hammer. Silas is also, to no surprise, a pretty skilled gunman. He can shoot dynamite out of the sky and even shoot targets while jumping off buildings. In terms of durability, Silas is like most modern FPS protagonists. He can take a few bullets before going down, but he still goes down pretty quickly. But where Silas really shines is speed. The best I could find for him is his duel with John Wesley Hardin, in which he's able to dodge multiple bullets. I was able to get a friend to calculate this speed, and though I can't explain the math, I'll just show it. He put the feat at 290 meters per second, and though I don't have footage of it, there were moments in my playthrough where a sense of death allowed me to dodge near point-blank blasts from shotguns. This is not a close match. Silas just blows James out of the water. First off, Silas is faster, like 30 times faster. Mind you, the calculation I showed you for Silas's speed was a conservative estimate. The friend who did the calculation didn't take into account that Silas is moving faster than the bullets in his duel with John Hardin. Now, James has some advantages over Silas. And I'm going to go over exactly why they're worth jack shit. First of all, James is more durable. He can take more gunshots than Silas, especially with the boilerplate. Problem being that it only covers his body, not the head. And a headshot is all that's needed to kill James. And Silas already has an upgrade that allows him to get automatic headshots. James's Sheriff Star probably won't help much either, because even though it halves damage, 50% of a bullet to the head is still pretty nasty. James is stronger, and realistically speaking, he could manhandle Silas, but considering both are prone to ranged combat, it's unlikely James will get the opportunity. And yes, James's Gatling gun surpasses any of Silas's firearms in terms of, just destructive capability and turning people into mincemeat. It also leaves James immobile while using it. And Silas has dealt with Gatling guns plenty of times. He knows how to deal with them. Just take some cover and throw dynamite and watch the fireworks. I think the best way to put it is that James, by all means, is a legend that men fear. But Silas is a man legends fear. James is meant to be a somewhat grounded character, while Silas, by his nature, is meant to come off as unbelievable, as someone whose accomplishments are meant to sound impossible. He's just way beyond anything James is capable of. And so with that, the winner of this episode is Silas Greaves.
You with your life, Dwight Eisenhower?
Tomorrow I'll be leaving for West Point, sir.
So, you want to be a soldier? Well, then do it right, son. Don't tear down the world out of anger and spite like I did. You build it up. You do something decent with your life, you hear me?
Sir? Yes, sir.
I won't have it said I left you with nothing, Bob.